Hello friends, welcome back to Whispers of Time. You wake up, check your phone, scroll for a few minutes, maybe a few hours, and somehow the day has already started taking pieces of you before you have even spoken a word. Your mind is full, your schedule is full, your screen is full, and yet somewhere underneath all that noise, something feels strangely empty, not tired, not sad, empty. And that emptiness has become one of the quietest and most dangerous problems of modern life. This is the strange contradiction of our time. People have more comfort than ever before, more access than any generation in history, more entertainment, more convenience, more information, more connection. And yet, so many feel hollow inside. They laugh, but the laughter fades quickly. They achieve things, but the satisfaction disappears fast. They stay busy all day, but at night they feel like nothing real happened. This is not laziness. This is not weakness. This is what happens when life becomes full of stimulation, but empty of meaning. Modern life has made it very easy to survive and very difficult to feel alive. For most people, the emptiness does not begin with tragedy. It begins with repetition. The same alarm, the same screen, the same routine, the same tired face in the mirror. Day after day, many people are not living with intention. They are reacting. They wake up and immediately give their attention away. Notifications, messages, news, social media. Before their own thoughts even arrive, the world has already entered their mind. This is where the emptiness begins, not in pain, but in constant interruption. The human mind was not built for endless noise. It was not designed to process hundreds of opinions, endless comparison, artificial urgency, and constant digital stimulation every day. But this is exactly what modern people consume from morning to night. The result is subtle at first. Attention becomes weaker. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Rest becomes impossible. People can no longer sit alone without needing distraction. And when a person loses the ability to be alone with their own mind, they slowly lose the ability to understand themselves. That is one of the deepest reasons modern people feel empty. They are constantly connected to everything except themselves. A person may spend hours talking online, watching videos, replying to messages, consuming content, and still go to sleep feeling emotionally disconnected. Why? Because communication is not the same as connection. Noise is not the same as meaning. Activity is not the same as purpose. Modern life gives people endless access to interaction, but very little depth. People are surrounded by voices and still feel unheard, surrounded by content and still feel unstimulated in the soul, surrounded by people and still feel alone. This is not an accident. Much of modern life is designed to keep people occupied, distracted, and emotionally dependent on external stimulation. The more distracted a person becomes, the less they question how empty they actually feel. And that is why so many people stay busy. Busyness has become a form of emotional avoidance. Many people are not exhausted because life is too hard. They are exhausted because they never truly stop. Their body rests, but their mind never does. Even in silence, they reach for something. Music, a video, a message, a screen. Something to avoid the discomfort of stillness. But stillness is where truth begins. And that is exactly what many people have been trained to avoid. Because in silence, the real questions begin. Am I actually happy? Do I enjoy this life, or have I simply become used to it? When was the last time I felt deeply present? When was the last time I did something meaningful without needing validation for it? These questions are uncomfortable because they expose something modern life works very hard to hide. Many people are not empty because they have nothing. They are empty because they have filled their lives with too much of what does not matter. And that is where the real problem reveals itself. Modern people are not starving for entertainment, they are starving for meaning. Not more content, meaning. Not more distraction, meaning. Not more attention, meaning. And until that difference is understood clearly, the emptiness remains, no matter how full life appears from the outside. The modern world has become incredibly efficient at helping people escape themselves. And for a while, that escape feels harmless. It feels normal. A little scrolling to relax, a little noise to avoid silence, a little distraction to make the day easier. But what begins as comfort slowly becomes dependency. And what feels like relief often becomes the very thing creating the emptiness people are trying to escape. This is where the problem becomes more serious. Most people do not feel empty because they lack pleasure. They feel empty because they have too much of it in the wrong form. Modern life delivers constant stimulation in small, fast, effortless doses. A new video in seconds, a new opinion in seconds, a new image, a new message, a new distraction always waiting. The brain begins to adapt to this rhythm. It stops craving depth and starts craving speed. It stops seeking meaning and starts seeking stimulation. And that changes a person more than they realize. When the mind becomes addicted to constant stimulation, ordinary life begins to feel unbearably dull. A quiet morning feels boring. A long conversation feels exhausting. Reading feels slow. Reflection feels uncomfortable. Work feels heavy. Real life begins to lose its color, not because life has become empty, but because the mind has been conditioned to expect intensity at all times. This is one of the clearest psychological traps of modern life. The more stimulation a person consumes, the less sensitive they become to what is real. Simple joys lose their effect. A walk feels meaningless. A meal feels forgettable. A sunset becomes background noise. Time with family feels less engaging than a screen. This is not because those things have lost value. It is because the nervous system has been trained to ignore quiet forms of meaning. And when a person can no longer feel the value of ordinary life, emptiness begins to spread into everything. This is why so many modern people feel emotionally flat, not broken, not destroyed, just disconnected. They are not always in pain. In many cases, they simply feel nothing deeply. They move through the day half-aware, mentally overstimulated, and emotionally undernourished. They can react, but they struggle to feel. They can consume, but they struggle to absorb. They can function, but they no longer feel fully alive inside their own life. And this emotional numbness creates another problem. People begin confusing intensity with fulfillment. They start believing that if life feels empty, the answer must be more. More excitement, more money, more attention, more achievement, more entertainment, more novelty. So they chase stronger experiences, hoping stronger stimulation will create deeper meaning. But it never does. It only creates a brief emotional spike, followed by the same familiar drop. That cycle is one of the most exhausting traps in modern life. A person feels empty. They seek stimulation. They feel temporary relief. The feeling fades. They feel empty again, so they seek more. This cycle repeats so often that many people begin building their entire identity around escape. They become dependent on being occupied, dependent on noise, dependent on novelty, dependent on external input to regulate internal emptiness. And over time, they lose contact with the deeper parts of themselves. This is where many people begin to feel quietly lost, not because they failed, because they adapted to a system that rewards distraction and punishes depth. Modern life praises speed. It rewards reaction. It glorifies productivity, performance, visibility, and endless engagement. But the human mind does not become whole through constant output. It becomes whole through coherence, through reflection, through meaning, through silence long enough to hear what has been buried underneath all the noise. And this is the point many people spend years avoiding, because once the distractions become quiet, something uncomfortable appears. Grief. Not always dramatic grief, often quiet grief. Grief for time wasted, grief for years spent disconnected, grief for ignored emotions, grief for a self that was slowly abandoned while trying to become what the world expected. This is why silence feels so uncomfortable for many people. It does not only remove distraction, it reveals what distraction was covering. But this is also where recovery begins, because the moment a person can stop escaping long enough to face what is real, emptiness stops being a prison and becomes a signal. A signal that something meaningful has been neglected, a signal that the soul has been overstimulated and underfed, a signal that life does not need more noise. It needs reconnection. Reconnection begins in a way that feels almost too simple to matter, which is exactly why so many people overlook it. The modern mind has been trained to believe that every serious problem requires a dramatic solution, a complete reinvention, a new identity, a perfect plan. But emptiness rarely disappears through dramatic change. It begins to loosen through honest attention. The first real shift happens when a person stops treating emptiness as an enemy and starts treating it as information. That feeling is not meaningless. It is not random. It is not there to punish. It is there to reveal. Emptiness often appears when a person has spent too long disconnected from what is real, what is needed, what is true, and what actually nourishes the mind. The problem is not the feeling itself. The problem is how quickly most people try to silence it. But once the signal is heard clearly, the way out becomes visible. The first step is removing what keeps the mind overstimulated, not forever, not perfectly, but honestly. A person does not recover depth while feeding the same distractions that created numbness. This means reducing the noise that has become normal, less mindless scrolling, less compulsive checking, less digital consumption used only to avoid stillness. The goal is not punishment. The goal is space, because without space, nothing meaningful has room to return. At first, this feels uncomfortable. The silence feels heavier. The boredom becomes louder. Restlessness appears quickly. That is normal. This is not emptiness getting worse. This is the nervous system reacting to the absence of constant stimulation. Many people mistake this discomfort for failure and return immediately to distraction. But that discomfort is often the first sign that the mind is beginning to reset. Then comes the deeper work. A person must begin rebuilding contact with what modern life has weakened: attention, presence, depth. This starts in ordinary places, sitting with one thought long enough to understand it, taking a walk without needing a screen, eating without distraction, finishing one task without splitting attention 10 different ways, listening fully when someone speaks. These actions seem small, but they retrain something modern life has fractured. They restore the ability to remain present long enough for meaning to be felt again. And meaning is not found in constant intensity. It is found in contact. Contact with reality. Contact with the present moment. Contact with what matters enough to hold attention without forcing it. This is why recovery from emptiness often looks quiet from the outside. Nothing dramatic changes at first. The person may still live in the same home, do the same work, wake up to the same responsibilities, but internally, something begins to return. Their attention becomes less scattered. their thoughts become less noisy. Their emotional life becomes less numb. Ordinary things begin to feel visible again. This is how people begin to feel alive again. Not by escaping life, but by re-entering it fully. They begin noticing what drains them and what restores them. They stop calling constant stimulation rest. They stop calling distraction relief. They stop confusing attention from others with connection to themselves. They begin choosing fewer things with more intention. They begin protecting their focus. They begin respecting silence instead of fearing it. And slowly, the emptiness changes. It becomes clarity. The same silence that once felt unbearable begins to feel honest. The same stillness that once felt threatening begins to feel restorative. The same life that once felt dull begins to feel real. This is the shift modern people are truly starving for. Not more excitement, not more comfort, not more escape. A return to depth, a return to presence, a return to a life that can actually be felt from the inside. Because the deepest human need was never endless stimulation. It was never constant pleasure. It was never to be entertained without pause. It was to feel connected, to live with attention, to experience meaning without needing to perform it. And that is why modern people feel empty. Not because life has nothing to offer, but because too much of what matters has been drowned in noise. And the way back has never been hidden. It begins the moment a person becomes quiet long enough to hear what their life has been trying to say.